The Obivatal. The more one realizes the complexity and diversity of work on oneself, the clearer become the difficulties upon the way, and one understands the indispensability of great knowledge, of immense effort and help, such as none of us have the right to count upon. Even to begin work on oneself in any serious form is an exceptional phenomenon, needing thousands of favorable inner and outward conditions. Then the beginning gives no guarantee for a future, with each step requiring an effort, each step needing help. The possibility of attaining anything seems so small in comparison with the difficulties faced, that many lose the desire to make effort of any kind. This is the inevitable stage through which all pass, until they have learned to understand that it is useless to think of the possibility or impossibility of big and distant achievements. That one must value what they get today, without thinking of what they might get tomorrow. The idea, though, of the difficulty and exclusivity of the way is correct. Can it therefore be possible that there is any difference between those that walk the way and those that have no concept of this system? Must we understand that people who are not passing along any one of the ways are doomed to turn eternally in one and the same circle, that they are merely food for the moon, that they have no escape and no possibilities? Is it correct to think that there are no ways outside the ways? And how is it then arranged that some people, much better people perhaps, do not come across a way, while others, weak and insignificant, come into contact with the possibilities of a way? There is nothing, and there cannot be any choice, of the people who come into contact with the ways. In other words, nobody selects them, and they select themselves, partly by accident, and partly through possessing a certain hunger. Whoever is without this hunger cannot be helped by accident, and whoever has this hunger, intensely, can be brought through accident, to the beginning of the way, in spite of unfavorable circumstances. What then of those that are killed, or have died from disease and famine, died in war or calamity? Could any of them have had any hunger, and then if so, could this hunger have helped them avert their untimely demise? This is an entirely different thing, as these people came under the influence of a general law. We do not speak of them, and we cannot, because there is no merit in doing so. We can only speak of people who, thanks to chance, to fate, or to their own cleverness, do not come under the influence of a general law, that is to say, those who stay outside the action of any general law of destruction. For example, it is known statistically that a certain number of people have to fall under trams and trains, die in motor accidents, drown or get crushed while crossing the road each year. Then if someone, even one with a great hunger, were to fall under a car and the vehicle crushes them, we can no longer speak of that person from the point of view of work on the ways. We can speak only of those who are alive, and then only while they live. Trams, ships, trains, cars, war, pestilence and famine are all exactly the same thing. One is merely larger and the other smaller. We are speaking therefore of those who do not drown, become afflicted with plague or fall under trains. Anyone, if they are hungry, has a chance to come into contact with the beginning of the way. However, aside from hunger, still other roles are necessary, otherwise they will not see the way. Imagine that an educated Westerner, someone who knows little about religion, comes into contact with the possibility of a religious way. They will see and understand nothing. For them, it will be stupidity and superstition. However, at the same time they may have a great hunger, though formulated intellectually. It is exactly the same thing for someone who has never heard of yoga methods, of the development of consciousness and so on. For them, if they come into contact with the yoga way, everything that they hear will be dead. The fourth way is still more difficult. In order to give the fourth way the correct valuation, a person must have thought, felt and been disappointed in many things beforehand. They ought, if not to have actually tried the way of the fakir, the way of the monk and the way of the yogi, previously at least to have known, and thought about them, then to be convinced that they are no good. It is not necessary to understand what is being said, and this thinking process can be unknown to the individual themselves. However, the results of the process must be within them, and only then can they help to recognize the fourth way. Otherwise they can stand very near to it, and simply not see it. It is however wrong to say that unless someone enters one of these ways, they have no further chances or opportunities. Ways are simply help, and nothing more than that, help given to people according to their type. At the same time, the ways, the accelerated ways, the ways of personal and individual evolution, as distinct from general evolution, can precede it, can lead up to it, however they remain distinct from it. There are 80,000 Dharma paths, and each must find their own yellow brick road. Whether general evolution is proceeding or not, is again another question. It is enough for us to realize at this point that it is possible, and therefore evolution outside of the way must also be possible. Speaking more correctly, there are two ways, or two kinds of ways. One we can call the subjective way, that includes all four of the ways that have been spoken of. The other we can call the objective way, which is the way of people in life. However, the names subjective and objective must not be taken here too literally. They express only an aspect, and are used simply by way of illustration. We could also use classic and romantic, as does Robert Pirsig. It would not be correct though to use the terms individual and general ways, because the subjective way is not individual in the general meaning of the word. This way is a school way. From this perspective, the objective way is much more individual, because it admits more individual peculiarities. Therefore it is better to use subjective and objective, but conditionally. People of the objective way simply live in life. They are those whom we call good people, and particular systems or methods are not necessary for making them. Making use of ordinary religious or intellectual teaching and ordinary morality, they live at the same time according to their conscience. They do not of necessity do much good, but they do no evil either. Sometimes they happen to be quite uneducated, simple people. However, they understand life very well, have the correct valuation of things, and the correct outlook. They are of course perfecting themselves, and evolving, only their way can be very long and with much unnecessary repetition. It often seems to people of the way, that is of the subjective way, particularly those that are just beginning, that other people of the objective way, are not moving. This is however a great misconception, as a simple obivartal may sometimes do such work within themselves, that they will overtake another, such as a monk or even a yogi. Obivartal is a strange word in the Russian language. It is used in the sense of inhabitant, though without any particular shade. At the same time it is used to express contempt or derision, as in obivartal. As though there could be nothing worse. However, those that speak in this way do not understand that the obivartal is the healthy kernel of life. From the point of view of the possibility for evolution, a good obivartal has many more chances than a lunatic or a tramp. Shortly, the use of these terms will be explained, however for the moment we will focus on the obivartal. It must not be assumed however that all obivartals are people of the objective way, nothing of the sort. Among them are thieves, rascals and fools, then there are still others. It is simply important to point out that being a good obivartal by itself does not hinder the way. Then finally there are different types of obivartal too. Imagine for example, the type of obivartal that lives all of their life just as the other people around them do, conspicuous in nothing, perhaps a good leader who makes money, and is even a little close-fisted. At the same time they dream all of their life of monasteries and convents, dreams that some time or other, they will be able to leave everything and go into a seclusion. Such things happen in the East and in Russia. Someone lives and works, then when their children or the grandchildren are grown up, they give everything to them, and retire to a reclusive life. This is the obivartal of which we speak. Perhaps they do not go into a seminary, they may not need this. Their own life as an obivartal can be their own personal way. People who are thinking about definite ways, particularly intellectual ways, very often look down upon the obivartal, and in general despise the virtues of the obivartal. However, they only show by this their own personal unsuitability for any way whatsoever. Because no way can begin from a level lower than the obivartal. This is often wasted upon people who are unable to organize their own personal lives, who are too weak to struggle with and conquer life circumstances, dreaming instead of ways to escape, or at least what they consider are ways, such as substance abuse, because they think it will be easier for them than actual life, and because this justifies their weakness and their inability, it supports the narrative that they live behind. Someone could be a good obivartal, and therefore much more helpful from the point of view of the way, than say a tramp, who thinks themselves higher than an obivartal. The term tramp is used here to refer to the so-called intelligentsia, to artists, poets and any kind of bohemian in general who despises the obivartal, but at the same time they would be unable to exist without them. The ability to orientate oneself in life is a very useful quality from the point of view of the work. A good obivartal should be able to support at least 20 persons through their own labor. What is anyone worth who is unable to do this? What does the term obivartal actually mean then? Can it be said that an obivartal is a good citizen, or an upstanding member of the community? Ought an obivartal to be patriotic? What attitude should an Obivatal have towards war or ecology? There can be different wars, and there can be different patriots. We all still believe in words and labels far too much. An Obivatal, if they are a good Obivatal, do not believe in words. They realize how much idle talk is hidden behind them, and people that shout about their patriotism are psychopaths for the Obivatal, so they look upon them as such. Then how would an Obivatal look upon people who are pacifists, or who refuse to go to war? Equally as lunatics, only probably even more so. A good deal remains incomprehensible because we do not take into account the meaning of some of the simplest words that we commonly use. For example, we have rarely, if ever, thought about what to be serious really means. Try to give yourself an answer to the question what being serious means. Having a certain attitude or position towards things is what most people would probably say, which is actually the reverse. To have a serious attitude towards things does not mean being serious, because the principal question is towards what things are we being serious. Many people have a serious attitude towards trivial things, but can they themselves be called serious? Of course not. The mistake is that the concept serious is taken conditionally. One thing is serious for one person, and another thing is serious for another. In reality, seriousness is one of the concepts that can never, and should under no circumstance, ever be taken conditionally. Only one thing should be serious for all people at all times. Someone may be more aware of it, or less aware of it, but the seriousness of things will not alter on this account. If one could understand all the horror of the lives of ordinary people, those who are turning around and around in a circle of insignificant interests and insignificant aims, if we could understand what it is that we are losing, then we would understand that there can be only one thing that is serious for us: to escape from under the influence of general law and be free. What can be serious for someone who is in prison and condemned to death? Only one thing: how to save themselves and how to escape. Nothing else is serious. When it is said that an Obivatal is more serious than a tramp or a lunatic, what is meant by this is that, accustomed to dealing with real values, an Obivatal values the possibilities of the ways, and the possibilities of liberation, of salvation, far better and quicker than someone who is accustomed all of their life to a circle of imaginary values, imaginary interests, and imaginary possibilities. People who are not serious for the Obivatal are people that live by fantasies, chiefly by the fantasy that they are able to do something. The Obivatal knows that they only deceive people, promise them Lord knows what, and that they are simply arranging affairs for themselves, hiding behind secret agendas and narratives. Or that they are simply lunatics, which is still worse. In other words, they believe everything that other people say, passing it off as entertaining. To what category do politicians then belong, who speak contemptuously about Obivatal opinions and Obivatal interests? They are the worst kind of Obivatals, that is, Obivatals without any positive redeeming features, or they could be charlatans, lunatics, and even knaves. Can honest and decent people then exist among politicians? Certainly they can, but in this case, they are not practical people. They are dreamers, and get used by others as screens, to cover their own obscure affairs. The Obivatal perhaps may not understand this in a philosophical way, that is to say, they are not able to formulate it. However, they know that things do themselves, simply through their own practical shrewdness. In the heart they therefore laugh at people who think, or who want to assure us all, that they signify anything. That anything depends upon their decisions, that they can change, or in general do anything about anything. This for the Obivatal is not being serious, and an understanding of what is not serious helps them to value what is really serious. The point lies in being ready to sacrifice one's freedom. Someone consciously and unconsciously struggles for freedom as they imagine it, and this, more so than anything else, prevents them from attaining real freedom. A person who is capable of attaining anything comes sooner or later to the conclusion that freedom is an illusion, and they therefore agree to sacrifice this illusion. They voluntarily become a slave, do what they are told to do, say what they are told to say, and think what they are told to think. They are not afraid of losing anything because they know in their heart that they had nothing to begin with. In this way they acquire everything in them that was real in their understanding, in their sympathies, tastes and desires. It all comes back to them, only accompanied now by new things that they did not have, and could not have had before, together with a feeling of unity and will within themselves, which is the fifth dimension of actualization, of all things that are and have been. However, to arrive at this point, one must first pass through the hard way of slavery and obedience. If they want results, then they must obey not only outwardly, but inwardly as well. This requires great determination, and determination requires an understanding of the fact that there is no other way. That a person can do nothing by themselves, but at the same time that something has to be done. When someone comes to the conclusion that they cannot and do not desire to live any longer in the way that they have lived up until then, when they really see everything that their life is made up of, and decide to work on this, they must be truthful with themselves in order not to fall into a still worse position. Simply because there is nothing worse than to begin work on oneself, and then to leave it, finding yourself caught between two stools. In this case it is better not to begin at all. Then, in order not to begin in vain, or risk being deceived on one's own account, one should test the decision many times. Principally, we must know how far we are willing to go, and what we are willing to sacrifice. There is nothing easier to say than everything. Someone can never sacrifice everything, and this can never be required of you. But they must define exactly what it is that they are willing to sacrifice, so as not to bargain about it afterwards. Or it will be the same with him as it was with the wolf in the Armenian folk tale. Once there lived a wolf that slaughtered a great many sheep and reduced several people to tears. At length, it is not known why, but he suddenly felt qualms of conscience and began to repent his life, so decided to reform and to slaughter no more sheep. In order to do this seriously, he went to a priest and asked him to hold a thanksgiving service. The priest began the service, and the wolf stood weeping and praying in the church. The service was long. The wolf had slaughtered many of the priest's sheep. Therefore the priest prayed earnestly that the wolf would indeed reform. Suddenly the wolf looked through a window and saw that the sheep were being driven home. He began to fidget, but the priest went on and on without end. At last the wolf could contain himself no longer, and he shouted, "Finish it, priest, or all the sheep will be driven home, and I shall be left without supper." This is a good tale, because it describes humanity very well. We are ready to sacrifice everything, but after all, today's dinner is a different matter. Someone always wishes to begin with something big, however this is not possible. There can be no choice in the matter, and we must begin with the things of today.